It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, why airlines may take legal action over the Heathrow shutdown. After a fire at an electrical substation led to the UK's busiest transport hub being closed, a group representing companies such as BA and Virgin say they may go to the courts if they're not reimbursed. This is as the airport boss is summoned to face MPs. Also ahead tonight, the PM rejecting calls to introduce a Minister for Men after hit Netflix drama Adolescence sparked a national conversation around the impact of toxic masculinity on young boys. So Keir Starmer says he is worried, but a minister isn't the answer. It comes as new figures show the number of male teachers in school is now at a record low. Plus, we meet Joy Milne, the woman who could smell her husband's Parkinson's 10 years before it was found by doctors. This is as she teams up with researchers to help use her skill for early diagnosis of the disease. And the government tells councils to prove they are fixing potholes or risk losing millions of pounds of funding. But will it actually make a difference to the state of our roads? Well, that's come and much more here on the UK Tonight. But we start tonight with the ongoing row over the Heathrow shutdown on Friday. The airport boss has been summoned to face MPs as questions continue to be asked over whether Heathrow needed to be closed entirely following that fire at an electrical substation. The closure caused disruption to more than 1,300 flights and 200,000 passengers. But the head of the National Grid has suggested today that the airport did have sufficient power to avoid a full shutdown. It comes as airlines say that they may take legal action if they're not properly reimbursed. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has this report.
The great economic engine of Heathrow roared back into life at the start of a new week. The skies over West London crowded once more, 72 hours after a shutdown that raises fundamental questions about the resilience of the UK's biggest transport hub.
Heidi Alexander.
Hey. The government promising a full review.
There will, of course, be learnings to ensure we avoid such incidents from reoccurring. The review will also seek to understand any wider lessons to be learned for energy resilience for critical national infrastructure.
Facing tens of millions of pounds in compensation claims, airlines may turn to the courts to recoup their losses.
This is incredibly frustrating because Heathrow is the most expensive airport in the world. But in the near future, there will have to be an independent investigation of what happened and why recovery did take so long. And then from there, if we don't get good enough recourse and repayment in terms of the costs, then yes, there may be a case for legal action.
An investigation will focus on the catastrophic substation fire that temporarily cut power to the airport and the response of the private companies that run Heathrow and the National Grid. National Grid insists that while the fire at North Hyde cut power to Heathrow and tens of thousands of homes, 2 other substations remained online and connected to the airport. Sky News understands these are at Laleham and Iver. So it appears the issue was not power, but how fast Heathrow was able to use it.
For them to do that reconfiguration, they had to shut the airport. There's no debate over that. That is quite a big reconfiguration job that they had to go through. So right beside Heathrow, there's a new data centre. That data centre actually consumes 2-3 times as much electricity as Heathrow does. But what they have done, like every other data centre in the UK, is they've got full resilient backup that kicks in immediately.
Heathrow and the National Grid, both privately owned companies running critical national infrastructure, face questions about their resilience. The airport about why it took so long to transfer its systems to the new power sources in the grid, about how such a catastrophic fire could have started and take out its own backups on the same substation site. The official report into what went wrong will be published in May. Passenger and business confidence may take longer to repair. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
His father is one of France's worst sex offenders. His mother, a national hero. Now, David Pelicot has spoken to Sky News about the moment he found out about the crimes committed against his mother, Giselle. His father, Dominique Pelicot, was found guilty in December of raping and drugging her and inviting dozens of strangers to do the same. It reignited the conversation about violence against women right around the world. David sat down with our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins.
It's a moment that will remain etched in my memory forever. So, on the 2nd of November, 2020, around 8:15 p.m, I was in the kitchen with my wife and children. The phone rings. I pick up the phone and it's my mum, who tells me that I have to go somewhere quiet and alone, because what she's going to tell me is so unbelievable that I should be alone. And what she told me was like a tsunami, that she was abused by many men that David Pelicot, her ex-husband, had invited to rape her. I felt so many emotions rising within me, and then the nausea, which had been mounting during the entire conversation, reached a peak. I hung up the phone, and it felt like the floor gave away under my feet, and I felt sick. I went to the bathroom and threw up.
The scale of abuse uncovered was mind-blowing, not just from your father, but the fact that he invited other men to rape your mother as well. How did you as a son, as the oldest son, process that?
David Pelicot, c'était en tout cas en ce qui me concerne.
David Pelicot was, for me, the backbone of the family. He had taught me to respect women. And so, when I heard what he had done to our own mother, as the eldest son, I was filled with anger and total incomprehension. He was my father, but he's not anymore. Today, he's a monster.
Et aujourd'hui, c'est un monstre.
You call your father a monster. How do you see your mother?
First and foremost, she's our mum.
C'est aussi la grand-mère de nos enfants.
She's also our children's grandmother. But today, and for the rest of her life, she will be a heroine.
Jusqu'à la fin de sa vie, une héroïne. Maman essaye de se reconstruire.
Mum is trying to rebuild herself, little by little. We have endured such unspeakable pain throughout this trial.
Have you heard from Dominique since he's been sentenced? Has he tried to contact you?
Alors, je vais vous faire une confidence, il nous a écrit.
I'll tell you a secret. He wrote to me before the trial. But the first thing I asked myself was, why is he writing to me? Is he writing to apologize, to ask for forgiveness, or to try to manipulate me? So I read his letter carefully, but quite honestly, I tore it up and I threw it in the bin. He was asking for forgiveness, but forgiveness? Personally, I will never forgive him.
Personnellement, jamais je pourrais pardonner.
What's your message to David Pelicot, though? If you could speak to him now, what would you say to him?
Why? Pourquoi?
Do you think he'll ever tell you why?
Non, je ne pense pas.
No, I don't think so. I have no doubt he'll die in prison, and rightly so. But I'm convinced that he'll take many of his secrets to the grave.
David Pelicot there talking to Siobhan Robbins here on Sky News. Now, on Wednesday, the Chancellor is delivering her spring statement. We already know about the government's welfare reforms and its plans to slash £2 billion from the civil service budget. But what else can we expect? Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, has been taking a look.
Wednesday, the day the Chancellor's got to get the public finances back on track. And here's Rachel Reeve's problem in a nutshell. She set herself very tight borrowing limits. By 2029, day-to-day government spending must be funded entirely by taxes and not at all by borrowing, which we haven't achieved, you can see all this borrowing above the line, in decades. Back when she set this target in October, her own watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, found she was only going to succeed by the slimmest of margins, a touch under £10 billion. But since last October, growth, look at this, is down 2% to 1%. Borrowing is up to 151 billion. All of this means her headroom is wiped out and she misses her own target. So she's got to find immediate savings across government to replace it. So what's she going to do? Well, actually, we've got a pretty good idea because of these two. Budget-type events used to be state secrets, but after their mini-budget, the Treasury doesn't like surprises anymore. So we think Rachel Reeves has to fill a black hole of about £10 billion. It might be a touch more. And she cannot break her borrowing promises, and she needs to restore the headroom to at least what it is at the moment. So this requires the following immediate action. We heard some of it last week, squeezing welfare spending, cuts to disability payments. Then there's squeezes to future government spending. Rachel Reeves says this means efficiencies and civil service cuts, but no return to austerity. We'll see. And then, finally, there's a technical accounting change. A month ago, Keir Starmer increased defence spending by squeezing aid spending. Because of an accounting anomaly, this helps the Chancellor to the tune of billions. Now, the big call on Wednesday will be how much to squeeze future public spending levels. But look back over spending settlements of the last 30 years. It's not going to be easy. Rises of 2, 3, 4, even 5% almost, all the time apart from the post-2010 austerity years of the coalition. But look at this, decent increases last year, this year. But after 2026, Rachel Reeves was plotting increases of just 1.3%. But on Wednesday, this could drop to 1.2 or 1.1%. And with areas like health protected, some government departments could see real terms cuts. Is it austerity light? Then there's welfare. We are told that Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall saved Rachel Reeves £5 billion last week. But we only found out where the savings come from precisely on Wednesday in an impact assessment that gets published on the same day as the spring statement. Which disabled people lose out the most? That could be a major flashpoint. Rachel Reeves will say the world has changed, although she's stuck to the same borrowing rules and tax promises as the autumn. The big question is whether this level of tax and spend overall is sustainable in the long term, or whether, come the autumn, if growth still hasn't arrived, the next budget brings yet more tax hikes.
Meanwhile, councils across England have been told today they must declare how many potholes they have fixed in their area or risk losing millions of pounds in new government funding. The Department for Transport says the road maintenance budget for local authorities will be boosted by £500 million in April, with councils ranked according to their pothole filling progress. But will it make any difference to the state of our roads? I'm joined now by Dave Gaster, author of Curbing Pothole Britain. Good to have you on the programme tonight. This is something that comes up a lot, not just here on the news programme, but also anecdotally as well. Everybody's had a tangle with a pothole. The big question is this enough? Because I was just looking around today and I read a report from earlier this month that said the southeast of England alone needs 2.5 billion to repair its roads.
No, 1.6 billion is nowhere near enough. The backlog of road repairs is 16.8 billion, and then there's about another 16 billion backlog of all other highway repairs. So just bringing in 1.6 billion is hardly going to touch the edges.
Is this just for potholes, though? Because there has been a wider amount of money announced, but it seems that the Prime Minister is saying, 500 million is for potholes alone.
The 500 million for potholes alone, it's almost a misnomer. There have been monies brought in for A roads and other major roads as well as sort of capital schemes. But effectively, they're trying to make roads safer and at the same time underinvesting in the roads, and they're on a downward decline to oblivion.
Do you think the government actually needs a more innovative approach, investment in better solutions? Because there's been technological and scientific advances in this area. We've spoken to entrepreneurs on this channel talking about better solutions for fixing potholes, so you don't get the same old cycle of damage and repair.
There are innovations around. There's machinery, there's asphalt types, there's special ways of fixing roads. some of which are used well. My own local authority bought a Pothole Pro from JCB, which is a very good machine, and they've used it to 1/3 of the capacity that other local authorities are using it. So you can buy a good kit, but if you're not using it well, it's almost wasting the money. Locally, I've worked out that for every £4 spent on highways, £3 is wasted because they're doing the wrong thing in the wrong places in the wrong way. That needs to be looked at by government much more than arbitrary numbers.
Yeah, Dave, that's interesting. You're saying the government is giving the local authorities more money, but perhaps they haven't got the expertise or the up-to-date skills to be able to tackle this effectively. Is that what you're saying?
There's that, and they can hide behind lots of things. We know in say, a hospital, they've got to face the Care Quality Commission, and yet there's nothing like that in roads. You can't even report it to an ombudsman because they say they're not interested. So there's no way to report bad authorities.
Yeah, you're going to get a league table of local authorities now. They're going to have to tell residents how many potholes they fix. So it's almost like the public will hold them accountable. Where is our local authority on the league table of fixing potholes? And if they, if they aren't fixing enough, they won't get any more funding. Do you think that's the right approach from the government to force local authorities to tackle this effectively?
So first question is, will there be honesty in that? And are they talking about fixed or repaired? Some of these things are fixed 5 times in 5 months and still there on the 6th month. Unless they actually permanently make the fix, they're wasting their money. And that's part of the problem. And with the best will in the world, the government have been told that curing Pothole Britain could save them 25 billion a year, and they won't engage. It's just that step too far, too scientific, too much work to try to work out how to get this started. They're not addressing efficiency, they're not addressing effectiveness.
Yeah, Dave, I was listening to an interview with the Prime Minister announcing this this morning, and he kept saying that people who have had a tangle with a pothole, it's irritating. And I kept thinking, it's more than irritating. He did say, there's a public safety issue there, particularly with cyclists, but it's more than irritating to motorists, isn't it? It can be ruinous in some cases, because if you're, a small business or you don't have a couple of £100 to fix a tyre and that's how you get to and from work or do the school run, and you don't have any form of redress from your local council because the process of trying to get any kind of compensation for hitting a pothole is nigh on impossible to navigate.
It's made much more difficult than it should be. And the council sits behind Section 58 of the Highways Act, which is a defence mechanism. And they sit behind a small part of that. And because of that, they're not looking at the whole scenario. They're not actually facing the whole law. They're not doing things properly. They're smoke and mirrors. It's untrue. The road next to me at the moment has got a Section 56 notice on it because it is out of, it's just not fit for purpose. And yet, for the last 3 weeks in a row, they've shut the dual carriageway and put 15,000 extra vehicles a day down there, causing lots of crashes, lots of damage. And the council was saying, oh, we didn't expect that.
Well, listen, Dave, as if you've reflected there, this is, as you see it, far from the solution that is needed. We will see what happens in April when this comes into effect. That's Dave Gaster there, author of Curbing Pothole Britain. Thank you so much for your contribution tonight. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight, we'll meet the woman who could smell her husband's Parkinson's disease more than 10 years before it was found by doctors. It's a remarkable story. And the Prime Minister rejecting calls to introduce a Minister for Men. This is as new figures show the number of male teachers is at a record low. We'll be discussing what impact that has on boys in the education system. That's coming up.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
a show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we have to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world?
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News?
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Now to an astonishing medical breakthrough. My next guest tonight is helping to diagnose early cases of Parkinson's disease through smell. Joy Mill has a condition known as hyperosmia, an incredibly hypersensitive sense of smell, and she is using it to help scientists sniff out the disease. Well, I'm very glad to say that Joy joins me now, as does Professor Perdita Barrett from the University of Manchester, the two ladies working together on this breakthrough. And thank you so much for joining me. And Joy, did I pronounce hyperosmia right?
Yes, it's hyperosmia.
Hyperosmia, yes, it is a very rare condition, and you have it, this hypersensitive sense of smell. It's worth talking to us about how all of this came about, because you notice a change of smell in your husband. We all know the scent of our partners, but in particular, you, with your very strong sense of smell, noticed a change.
Yes, well, when you're saying to your husband, well, you're smelling, you're not having enough showers, and well, you're not brushing your teeth enough, and various other things. I mean, it doesn't go down well to start off with, does it?
I'm sure it doesn't.
And we continued like that for a while, and then I thought, I've got to stop this. He's not terribly pleased. I'll just have to keep quiet. He knew I had hyperosmia. He knew I could smell things. And because we'd met when we were 16, it was quite a thing between us that he was very careful. He didn't wear any perfume scent or anything like that. But it was about when he was 29, there was a definite change, a very distinct change. And by the time he was 31, his smell had completely changed. But various things began to happen, and I thought he maybe had a brain tumour. So, like many, and that's the case, go off to see your GP and you end up at a neurologist, but the neurologist did diagnose Parkinson's.
You knew you had to do something with this. You needed to be taken seriously. So you found a biologist that you wanted to get in front of, and you went to a conference and literally put your hand up in the audience, didn't you?
Yes.
And how were you taken seriously? Because this is something, using smell to diagnose conditions or diseases, it wasn't really being talked about at that time.
Well, Professor Thilo Kunath was very much involved with Parkinson's, and I had gone into the Parkinson's meeting in Perth, and by the time I left, I could tell you who had Parkinson's, who didn't, and who didn't. Now, there were over 30 people there, and I was quite able to do it. Then Les, being a doctor, he realised what it meant. And we sat down as a doctor and nurse and discussed it. And he looked at the people who were doing talks. And yes, he chose Thilo. And much to Thilo's surprise, I stood up at the end of his stem cell lecture and said, well, why are you not using the smell of Parkinson's to diagnose it earlier? He was quite taken aback.
And that's how the conversation began. Professor Barron, you've both been working together for some time now to try and utilise this in diagnosing Parkinson's, and the hope is perhaps other conditions and diseases. Tell us about the work that you've been doing and what point you've reached.
So the first thing we wanted to do was to see if Joy was telling the truth, whether she really could do it. So we had to do an experiment which Thilo Kunath and I devised, which was to separate the obvious movement symptoms of people with Parkinson's disease from the smell. So we made some people wear T-shirts, and then T-shirts were put in bags, and the T-shirts were then given to Joy. Okay, so now there's no obvious relationship to anyone who has a disease. And Joy was 100% correct in smelling the T-shirts and diagnosing from a T-shirt whether someone had Parkinson's or not. So that was the first incredible step change, because it actually meant we could diagnose someone from material that they were wearing, from clothes. So T-shirts are okay to work with, but we now, instead of using T-shirts, we use gauze or just Q-tips. And the other really remarkable thing was where the smell was strongest. We thought it would be in the armpits. You kind of would, wouldn't you? But it wasn't. It was in the middle of the back and underneath the hairline. So we now swab from people's backs, or people can do it at home and get a carer or a relative to do it for them. And they post those swabs to us. And then we use a method called mass spectrometry, which is a method that weighs molecules. And that helps us to find out what they are. And we've worked, the image you just showed is Joy Milne, I'm not going to say her age, but a grandmother from Perth, sitting at a mass spectrometer. And what she's doing is, as the molecules are being identified by the machine, she's also smelling them. So we split them. Some go to be weighed and some go to Joy's nose. And that allows us to code to find out which of the very complicated mixture of molecules we have on our skin from skin swabs are to do with the disease, are the ones that smell of it.
This is remarkable. So you're replicating Joy's sense of smell. Joy, how does it feel to live with this? Because this is a blessing. You know, Professor Barron said, you know, in the beginning they didn't know whether to believe you, which I know you corrected yourself, but, you know, this is the stuff of tall tales, yet it is now grounded in science. But what's it like to live with this? Because you must walk past people on the street and be able to smell if they're carrying a condition that they may not be aware of. And ethically, I would imagine that's quite difficult to carry on walking by.
It is very difficult, but I have signed a non-disclosure because it is unethical. It is unethical. I can't do anything about that.
But I just wonder how that burden sits with you, because like I said, it's such a blessing to have what you have, but also it must be extremely difficult.
I think because it's a genetic thing in the female side of the family, my grandmother did warn me when she trained me. She did warn me not to use it. She said I would find it very difficult. Unless I made the decision that I would go ahead and do it. And I have made that choice. I was a nurse, a carer for my mother-in-law and my husband with Parkinson's. And really, it was the right choice. I think it is the right choice.
Yeah, and it's an incredible thing to do in your husband Les's memory as well. He, you know, wanted you to put this to good use, and you certainly are. Ladies, thank you so much for coming on to talk to us about it. Joy Milne and Professor Perdita Barron there. Really good to bring this story to people this evening. Some really welcome good news. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Remarkable. Right, still to come here on the UK Tonight. The Prime Minister rejecting calls today to introduce a Minister for Men. This comes as new figures show the number of male teachers is at a record low. A new report has suggested schools should adopt a boy-positive learning environment to address the gender gap in education. The Higher Education Policy Institute saying that a dedicated strategy is what is needed to tackle attainment differences between men and women. Essentially, boys, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, are being left behind, and that fact is being largely ignored. Well, it comes as former England manager Gareth Southgate spoke out about a lack of role models for boys, with figures highlighting that the number of male teachers in secondary schools is now at a record low, men making up only a third of all staff in England, and that number is falling still. The report suggests the government should introduce a Minister for Men to tackle these issues. That was something the Prime Minister rejected today, saying it wasn't the answer. But Sir Keir Starmer did say he was worried about what he's described as a crisis in masculinity. The PM, like many of us, has been watching the Netflix drama Adolescence that has really sparked a national conversation around toxic masculinity and the impact of social media on boys and young men. So much to talk about, isn't there? Well, I'm joined in the studio tonight by our education correspondent, Anne-Jean-Pierre Bacos, co-author of the report, Boys Will Be Boys, Mark Brooks, founder of Dad Vengers and CBeebies presenter Nigel Clark, and joining us remotely from Newcastle, assistant head teacher Jamie Gilbert. Well, it's really good to have you all with us this evening to tackle what is A massive topic. Mark, I'm going to come to you first as the report author. You say in the report that successive governments have been fudging this issue of boys being left behind in education. And this report feels really timely, given some of the points I mentioned in that introduction there, the talk about boys on social media and toxic masculinity, the conversation about a lack of role models. What is it you want people to take from this report?
Well, firstly, we want the whole issue about boys being behind girls at school actually to be taken seriously and recognised. These figures have been there for 30 years, if not more.
And you reference that in the title of the report, don't you? Boys will be boys. It's just seen as, oh, boys will be boys.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we want it to be recognised. Then we want Parliament for Education, the national education organisations, to really start to look at what is going on, why boys are behind, and then actually putting in proposals and policies to do so, and to close that gap. And we've seen some schools across England actually close the attainment gap. And one of the key areas is that they're really positive about boys within their school. They celebrate their achievements. They really have high expectations. They work with their families. They show boys that there is a reason for learning, i.e., if you learn well, if you get your exam results, they can see jobs in the future and trades and other going to university or apprenticeships. And so having that boy positive environment, which you can have whilst obviously not affecting the results and the attainment of girls at the same time.
Yeah. Andrew, you know, you're an education correspondent, you were a teacher not so long ago, and the picture in schools across England, what's it like? Because we're not just talking about education here, we're talking about behaviour. And I know we've talked about it here on the programme, the particular problem of children's behaviour, particularly boys in schools since COVID, and also the rise of social media in school and this toxic masculinity movement. What's the overall picture you're seeing in schools?
I think the social media aspect is really hard to regulate and manage in schools. I know lots of schools have taken a hard line and banned mobile phones and smartphones in schools. But once they leave the school gates, the jurisdiction ends there. And so we have to think about how, as a society, are we dealing with this issue of social media, and how are we teaching children to navigate that space? What are we equipping them with in terms of knowing what they're consuming, how they're consuming it, and questioning what they're consuming, but also how are we regulating what they're consuming? Where does the buck stop? Are these platforms being held to account in terms of the amount that the children are consuming? Are the platforms being held to account in the way that they are making these young people vulnerable? We worry about these things, but as a society, what are we doing to resolve these issues and remedy them?
Yeah, wringing our hands a lot, but where's the positive action? Nigel, you talk about this a lot, and you're a father of a teenage son, you have a daughter as well, am I right in saying? What are they saying to you about what life is like in school at the moment, particularly from a young boy's perspective?
I think the approach in schools has massively changed. I think schools are aware that we have to change what's been happening over the last, you know, few...
Well, we're talking decades.
Yeah, decades. It's been happening for so long. But I think it's totally new for the schools. I think the children are adapting quicker than the actual adults and teachers and parents, because it's a new space for us, but they're from a space where they've grown up with education on bullying, education on kindness, education on all these different things and the way that we need to treat people and relationships need to be. They've been taught this in the last 15 years from a very, very young age, so they're more used to it than we are. Our teachers, our adults, we're navigating this new space that we're adapting from that was totally different. We're in spaces where toxic masculinity was not even thought about. It was just part of the everyday sort of language. So we're having to learn something new, and they're sort of in this space where they know how it should be. I think the biggest problem that we're having is that we need to educate our teachers on how to talk to our kids about these things. I think they're navigating something that's totally new, and that's going to be a big sort of game changer for us. And I think when Sadiq Khan introduced last year that toolkit, he brought in a toolkit for London schools to educate them on how to teach the kids about relationships between them. That's the starting point. That's what we need to see around the country if we're going to change the sort of narrative.
Let's bring in Jamie Gilbert, our assistant head teacher from Newcastle. Jamie, what's it like in your school? We'll start on the online presence that is in schools now first. What are you seeing in your school, particularly when it comes to young boys and this threat of toxic masculinity? What effect are you seeing? What impacts are it having on your school?
So I work in a special educational needs setting. I work in an area called SEMH, so that's for catering for children with social, emotional, and mental health difficulties. And, you know, the lack of male positive role models is an issue, especially if you don't have that in schools and if you're not getting that at home as well. So if you don't have a, you know, like a father figure at home, the next point of call, the children are going to start to go online. And then obviously going back to the studio, if you're consuming a negative stuff online and that's your only, you know, positive male role model, then that's obviously a huge issue.
The Gareth Southgate speech last week, how much of it did you see and how much did it resonate? Because again, that made people sit up and take notice, because Gareth Southgate is seen as a role model for the way he conducted himself, not just as a footballer, but as a football manager. And he was saying that there is this vacuum of role models. And it comes back to, you know, this report saying the number of male teachers in secondary school and in primary education as well, those really formative years, are lacking. What did you make of his speech, and how much of it do you think we need to discuss further? Because, you know, it's taken somebody like Gareth Southgate in a Netflix drama for people to actually put this on the table to talk about.
No, I think he's absolutely spot on. You know, it's a real issue at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you're both nodding your head here, Nigel and Mark, and particularly you, Nigel, when I mentioned primary school. You know,
it's even worse
some of the statistics, I was just looking, I think I actually took them from your report, actually. Just 1/4 of the teaching workforce are male, with around 250,000 more female teachers than male teachers. At nursery and primary level, only 1 in 7 teachers are male, although this goes up somewhat to just 35% at secondary level. That's coming from the Education Policy Institute. 30% of primary schools have no male teachers at all.
Yeah, it's incredible. It gives the picture that men aren't nurturing. And that's a picture that we need to change. Like, we need to see men with young kids, preschoolers, engaging with them in that loving way, because that's going to change a whole system. It's going to change the outlook for those kids. It's going to change what they aspire to be, which is what we're talking about here. Because I think that's what it's about. It's about aspiration. And I don't think that young men have as many academic aspirations as they maybe should.
No, Mark, that's interesting. What is that a barrier for boys getting on in education as well as girls? Is that they're not seeing men in those educator roles early enough? And there also isn't that, again, particularly in primary schools, so much of it's to do with caring and pastoral roles, as well as, you know, the building blocks of education. But that's the formative stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. And building on that, I mean, what happens is that the boys don't see that learning is something that boys and men actually do. Also, you've got male teachers understanding what it's like to be a boy, especially teenage boys going through puberty, for example. And also coming back to lack of boys, we want boys and young men to see teaching as actually a career for them. One of the issues is, we keep pointing out to governments, is that why are there no specific campaigns focused on persuading younger men and boys to become teachers?
Is that what a Minister for Men could do?
Well, exactly.
Because the Prime Minister, when he was talking about it today, said, no, I don't think we need that. But your report is saying, look, it's not just, you know, it's not like a Minister for Women and Equality. This is to look at why are boys falling behind in education. It's a serious issue. It's not a token role that you're proposing.
Well, absolutely. What the problem is irrelevant what you name the minister, but there's nobody in government looking at this. I mean, 150 teenage boys.
Not even in the Department for Education.
No,
there's not a specialist.
No, there's nothing.
Task force or
there's nothing.
To look
No,
at
there
what is
isn't.
a massive problem.
No, there isn't. There's nothing like that, and it's not this government. It's previous governments as well. So if you've got 150 teenage boys take their own life every year, we've got 500 boys in youth custody centres. So there's all of these other related issues, and we need somebody in government who's actually going to take responsibility for all of those together, and we haven't got that.
And Jim, how likely is that? Because while the Prime Minister's ruled out a Minister for Men, you know, this report and the fact that there is now this national conversation about boys in education, toxic masculinity, how likely is there to be some movement in the Department for Education to make some kind of accommodation for the fact that this is a massive issue affecting so many?
You'd hope that, given the report, but also given the outcomes of these young people, and we've seen that there are young boys and young men who are often NEET, so not in training, not in employment, not in education, and then you worry about
there? It's because of
the lack of the support that they need, but also the lack of apprenticeship. So children that don't want to go to university and go through that route, where is the alternative for these young men and these young boys? And I think the Department for Education are looking at things like apprenticeships, but they're not looking at it as a holistic issue and as a holistic problem from the very outset in primary school, where you don't have those role models, where young boys and young men are not seeing education as a way forward and as a key to social mobility. I think it needs to be addressed as a whole issue rather than looking at sporadic things that we can do in their minutiae to address the bigger problem.
Jamie, what did you see in teaching that so many young men are not seeing?
I had a very positive male role model. I was diagnosed late with ADHD as an adult at 34, and my PE teacher was phenomenal with me, and you know, in terms of providing movement breaks and the importance of physical activity and sport on my life. But I've also had the experience of negative role models at school. You know, my maths teacher said I would never equate with anything. So it's obviously trying to focus on the positives and, you know, really honing on that and not focusing on the negatives. I could have went down a complete different path if I focused on the negative side. And, you know...
Yeah. And Nigel, a final word about those role models. You know, again, so much is made of, Gareth Southgate mentioned it there, you know, footballers being seen as role models, and we always get into that debate, you know, when a footballer does something wrong, shouldn't they be role models? But it's about looking closer to home. It's about having, dare I say it, that father figure, if you haven't got one at home. It's that sports coach who believes in you. It's that teacher who says, you can do it, I'll help you. It's that, you know...
It's about having something, like you said, that's a little bit more close to home. That's kind of the reason I started Dad Vengers, is because I wanted dads and their kids to have the relationship where they are the role model, where they're pushing it. Because I think historically, dads have not got as involved as early as they should, and their involvement has been around football or things that might lead to toxic masculinity, where they should be focusing on just their relationships and the love that they feel in their family. But it's often...
Why can't dads do bedtime and story time and
don't get me started. Like, that's the whole thing.
Yeah, it's the gendered roles, isn't it? It's them being able to do everything.
That needs to change. And once that changes, then we've got hope.
Well, listen, really good to have you all in here discussing such a massive issue. We've only just scraped the surface, but I'm sure we will be talking about it much more in the near future. Nigel Clark there from Dad Vengers, Jamie Gilbert joining us from Newcastle as well, assistant head teacher, and Jan Pirbakos, our education correspondent, and Mark Brooks, author of that report, Boys Will Be Boys, which is a really eye-opening read, laying bare the state of education for young boys in England. Thank you so much. Thank you. As still to come on the programme, we'll hear from the band, who have been going for 68 years now, and they'll be playing one final gig before they retire this summer, and the gig is Glastonbury. And coming up in the sport, Emma Raducanu. She's through to the quarter-finals of the Miami Open. All the details on the way for you.
The Chancellor is looking for ways to promote growth.
Today, I want to talk about economic growth.
What plans will Rachel Reeves forecast for this spring?
Our growth prospects.
And will they bloom?
To British growth for growth, driving economic growth.
Get the full story first on Sky News.
Growth is the #1 mission.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We start with breaking news.
I am Anna Botting.
It's been quite some day.
The golden age of America begins right now.
A long-awaited ceasefire is now underway.
First question, Sky News.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
Describe this feeling, it's incredible.
Now to California.
The Democratic mayor of Los Angeles cut the fire department budget.
Do you owe citizens an apology? Have you nothing to say today?
Jane Secker, Sky News. Would you like to respond to us now?
I've never seen anything like this.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
In principle, would you agree to do that?
Criticism of you, the president, is banned. How is this a fair election?
Historic day here today.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere, waiting to see what the president might do next.
I gave you the A+ treatment. Thank you. Thank you all.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. I've covered Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent. Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
Hello, welcome back. We're going to look at the sports news now with Dave. We're checking on the football scores. But let's talk about Emma Raducanu doing really well in Miami.
Yeah, brilliant in Miami. Absolutely delighted for her. I mean, because she's had it tough, hasn't she? You know, stalking incidents, numerous injuries. She got rid of another coach just at the start of this tournament.
He was on trial. We were
Vladimir
talking during the break,
on trial for he lasted 2 weeks. Maybe he really positively impacted. Her quotes have been interesting. She said, before this round, I'd say I'm a bit of a free spirit, so I don't need restrictions or being told what to do. It's kind of working. She's playing beautifully. She beat Amanda Anisimova 6-1, 6-3, world ranked number 9. She's already beaten Emma Navarro, another top 10 ranked player. So brilliant to see. This is her best result in a kind of majors tournament. It's obviously not a Grand Slam, but a top tournament like this since she did so well winning the 2021 US Open.
More of the free spirit, please.
Just fantastic and great to see her playing and being at her best. So that is Emma Raducanu, and the tennis. We're going to be talking a little bit of football as well.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
It's no secret Wenger needs world-class defenders. Dozens of clubs are sure to be keeping an eye on Campbell's contract talks.
Arsene always had to identify the talent. It was never my decision, because he had to coach them, he had to motivate them, he had to train them, and I have actually executed his wishes. Once we...
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Time for a quick look at the weather now.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next few days looking fairly calm and dry with some sunshine, but it will be cloudy at times with a little patchy rain. Northwestern parts, mostly cloudy with outbreaks of rain this evening, while central and southern Britain and the far southeast of Ireland will be mostly dry and clear. Eastern Scotland looking mostly fine as well. Southern England remaining dry and clear tonight with a patchy frost and some fog developing. Northern and central parts, meanwhile, will be mild and cloudy.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The Searchers, dubbed the longest-running pop band in history, will be playing their final gig this year at Glastonbury. It will also be the first time the band's played the festival, capping a 68-year run which began in Liverpool back in 1957. Well, I'm really pleased to say the band's bassist and singer, Frank Allen, is with me now. Frank, hello.
Hello to you as well.
It's so good to see you at the end of what is the longest-running pop career we understand.
This is the fourth time we've ended, by the way. I tell you what, retiring is such a difficult thing and nobody lets you do it.
Well, I tell you what, going out on a Glastonbury stage will be the temptation to get you back, won't it?
Well, what happened last year was we'd already done 3 final tours.
Yeah.
We packed up in 2019, we had a break and settled everything and got through COVID, and then we thought, oh, we were talked into doing 1 final tour, and it was such fun. We talked into doing another one in 73, and we said, that's it, no more, unless something comes up that we can't refuse.
And then you get the call. What was that like, getting that call?
Amazing. It seems to have excited everyone. The phones, it got announced the other day. We knew about it a couple of months ago, but it got announced, I think, on Saturday. And the internet's been buzzing. We've had hits on the website, on Facebook and all. People seem, for some strange reason, quite excited about it.
Not at all. It's such an honour to be asked, and people talk about the incredible experience of Glastonbury. But you've been in this game such a long time. You started out in Liverpool in the 50s and 60s with the Beatles, no less. What was that time like? Because when you talk about Glastonbury being a highlight, I would imagine sort of your beginnings were too.
We've had a few highlights. I wasn't there at the beginning. I actually missed the first year. I became a searcher in August the 3rd, 1964, so I missed out the Liverpool bit. Where I discovered Liverpool was at the Star Club in Hamburg, which is where you suddenly realise there was this thing happening in Liverpool. Met the Searchers, who hadn't been in the studio at all, just, got to know them because they were nice, moderate, living people. And the Star Club was a madhouse. I mean, people fornicating, drinking, getting pilled up, God knows what. There was, I was. I never started drinking until I was in my 30s.
Well, I'll tell you what, prepare yourself for Glastonbury.
Well, no, is it? Look, I'm moderate. Moderation is the only thing I do to excess.
Well, listen, Glastonbury is the farewell gig, we think. In between now and then, can people see you if they haven't been lucky enough to get? Because they're the golden tickets, Glastonbury, no one can get them.
To do Glastonbury, we had to do a run of shows beforehand because just to get match fit.
Yeah.
Because we haven't played for a year, and you can't just leap into it and think you know everything again. We have to rehearse. Then we've got a run of 11 shows, and if anyone's going to these shows, check out our website. Come to the early ones because that's going to be fun because we'll make so many mistakes. It'll be hysterical. They're the best shows.
Well, listen, Frank, enjoy it. Well, I say enjoy the final run, but you never know. You could be back for a 5th time. That's Frank Allen there.
Royal Variety Show would be nice, wouldn't it? That's the only thing.
Oh, there you go. Somebody give him a call. Somebody give him a call. Frank, really good to see you. That's us for tonight. Up next, it is The World with Yalda. We'll see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock.